Okay, the next one then is to put a stumbling block before somebody. Leviticus 19:14, you shall not curse the deaf, nor put a stumbling block before the blind, but shall fear your God, I am the Lord. So this passage obviously can be taken literally, right? And placing an obstacle in front of a blind person. But the idea goes a lot deeper than that. It became a metaphor for causing someone to sin, or intentionally misleading them, or even accidentally misleading them, or somehow taking advantage of the spiritual weakness of the person, or just exploiting them to some degree. And so it became a metaphor or a Hebraism of that you're putting something in someone's path that would cause them to stumble on that path. It could be a bad influence. It could be anything, manipulation, exploitation, false teaching. It encompasses a lot of things. It's not just like false teaching. It's anything that would harm another believer. Romans 14 will talk about this, but rather resolve this, not to put a stumbling block or cause to fall in our brother's way. 1 Corinthians 8:9, beware lest somehow this liberty of yours become a stumbling block to those who are weak. Revelation 2:14, but I have a few things against you, because you have there those who hold to the doctrine of Balaam, who taught Balak to put a stumbling block before the children of Israel. So here's the basic concept. It's a maturity issue, and it's the idea that I don't want to cause somebody to see what I'm doing and cause them to sin, trip up, stumble, whatever you might be. So what do you mean by this? Well, a lot of times people are watching you, obviously, and they're looking at what you do. They're looking at how you behave, and they look at what you say. And so it could be verbally, the things you say, the things you talk about will betray that, and behavior can betray that. And like Paul will say, he goes, as you grow older in the Lord, you start realizing that you have certain liberties that you can do, and certain things in gray areas that allow you to do it, and it doesn't seem to be a problem for you. And again, we're talking about gray areas, and gray areas are preferences typically. You have a preference for this, and someone else doesn't have a preference for it. But what Paul was trying to get at is, if you make your preference a showcase of your liberty, then you're going to harm other people who don't have that liberty necessarily. So, for instance, one of the easiest ones to pick out is drinking alcohol in public. If you have the liberty to drink alcohol, then fine. But the problem is, the more you go up in leadership and the more people's eyes are on you, the more you have to curtail that in public, because other people can see that. And the problem is, you could say, well, I have my liberty. I'm not an alcoholic. Yeah, I know. But the problem is, you can't use your liberty towards someone else that might be an alcoholic, that might be struggling with alcohol, and they can't just have a drink or two or whatever. They go on binges, and they have major problems and stuff like that. And so, one of the expectations I have for my staff and our deacons is they refrain from drinking in public. That if they're going to drink, you need to do it at home, because too many people will see you, and it causes too many people to stumble. People will say, well, that's legalistic. It's not. It's about a gray area of not causing weaker brethren to stumble. I mean, if you knew what I knew of how many people struggle with alcohol, you would probably think about that yourself, and how many people are actually watching you that have alcoholism. Or it could be drugs or anything like that, but alcohol is a big one. So we've had deacons in the past, and I've gotten rid of them, but deacons that were so stupid, they would post them drinking online and post it on their Instagram and Facebook and this and that. And I said, do you realize that everyone's seeing this? I said, do you realize that they're calling me saying, what are you doing? And they go, what? I'm just doing what I can drink. Yeah, you can, but you're a deacon and everyone's watching you and you're causing all these other people in the church to stumble. So because he was bullheaded, we got rid of him. But that's the kind of nonsense that people do, and they don't think about their surroundings. They don't think about how they're being seen or anything else. Another big thing about causing people to stumble is the way you dress. And whether that's women or men, you always have to be aware of how you're dressed. Unfortunately, today's rules go out the door. You can go to job sites, and there is no, rules for dress anymore, especially among teachers. They dress like they're going to the gym. They don't dress professional. You go into some professional places and you expect profession and you don't get it. They're dressed like they're going to work in the backyard or something like that. And it's a lack of professionalism, I know. But it's this whole woke mentality of, well, don't judge how I look. Well, I am going to judge how you look because the Scripture wants us to maintain modesty. And what does modesty mean? Modesty is not just for women. And a lot of men, unfortunately, think that modesty is just for women, that they need to, women need to be dressed modest. How you understand modesty is this. You dress appropriately for the occasion you're going to. And that goes for men as well. Men are the worst as far as dress is concerned. They don't dress appropriately to the occasion they're going. I've been at funerals, guys show up in thongs and shorts. You don't show up to a funeral dressed that way, right? And you go to weddings, you dress up for the wedding. You don't go in flip-flops and shorts, guys. And what we're starting to have in our civilization is not proper decor. They're not wearing what they should be wearing. And again, it all has to do with, am I dressed appropriately for the situation I am? Am I going to the gym? Then dress appropriately for the gym. But I don't wear the gym clothes to church. It doesn't make sense. You don't show up to work and the work requires you a steel-plated toe and you show up in Birkenstocks and just say, you have to accept me, this is the way I am. No, that's you being selfish. You have to dress for others, not yourself. That's how you should be thinking about it. So, like, you go in these offices, and these people are scantily clad. I mean, it's out of control, man. And these are professional people, especially teachers. They show up in the teacher's room, and they're wearing very seductive clothes. Tell me this. Why would a teacher show up to a classroom of high schoolers wearing mini dresses and high heels, like they're going to a cocktail party? Is that, to me, that's somebody putting it out there. Or it could be anything, and so people say, well, you can't judge how I dress. Yes, I can. You're dressed immodestly. And the problem is the way you're looking is causing people to stumble. And a lot of people don't like that. But this is the problem of gray areas, and people don't even think about that. Another thing, to move on from that, and I think that's pretty clear, but the other thing is ostentatious wealth is another problem that causes people to stumble. So people want to show off their wealth. And they show it off by the cars they drive. They show it off by the things they carry. They show it off with everything. And I'm not saying you can't have nice things. I'm not saying that at all. But be wary of your environment when you're coming to an arena. And let's just say that probably the majority of people are poor. Or middle class or whatever. It doesn't help them when they see a millionaire flaunting their junk in front of them. It doesn't help them. It causes them to stumble. And that's another thing, is be wary of ostentatious wealth. Not everybody has made it. Not everybody has got it. And they struggle. And most people are struggling to meet financial debts. And it doesn't help them when you talk about a 3-week vacation to Europe. It doesn't help them. And so, we've had people in our church, and I've had to take them aside and say, you got to stop bragging. You are bragging every time you enter a room, and you name drop, and I know this guy, I know that guy. We went to the Bahamas for 2 weeks, and we went to here, and we did that. We went on an African safari, and we did this, and we went there, and it's like, enough. Everyone around you hates you, okay? They just hate you. And you need to shut your mouth, because no one can go on an African safari. No one can go to a 3-week trip to Europe. No one can go to the pyramids. No one can drive a Ferrari, okay? Just don't do that. Just shut up. But they don't know how. The problem with their pride makes them brag, and it's like, yeah, it doesn't look good. It doesn't look good in front of everybody. So let's say you are wealthy. God bless you. Just don't show it. Just act normal. Don't brag. That, keep that stuff to yourself, because the people around you are trying to make ends meet, and it really stumbles them. Stuff like that, right? So that's the kind of things I'm talking about. Talking about like how you celebrate Christmas. Some people are offended if you have a Christmas tree. Fine. Then don't brag about your Christmas tree. Don't brag that you don't have a Christmas tree. Just do what you need to do, right? But don't make it an issue for people. Holidays and other things that you celebrate. Okay, fine. Keep that stuff to yourself. No one cares. And the problem is you'll get into a fight if you talk about things, and especially in gray areas. And the real issue then becomes real tricky is when you make the gray areas black and white issues. And you make these gray areas black and white issues, and you say, if you don't do this or if you do that, you're not spiritual. And that gets really problematic, because if you make a gray area a black and white issue, you're going into legalism at that point in time. And look, if it's your choice to do something, knock yourself out, okay? It's your choice. But like Paul would say, don't use it to hurt somebody. What's the quintessential example that Paul used? Well, he used a meat sacrifice to an idol. And Paul had the freedom, knowing that if he bought a piece of meat from the marketplace, that the animal had been sacrificed to a foreign god. He realized, there's no God. It's not. There's no such thing as Zeus or any of these Greco-Roman gods. And so he had the freedom to say, well, I'll just buy a piece of meat and I'll eat it. No big deal. The problem is, what happened is Paul was doing that, and the Corinth church, who was really immature, really immature, carnal, really bad, they had a problem with it. Now, that's the funny thing. The Corinth church strained at gnats and swallowed camels. They didn't have a problem with some dude shacking up with his mother-in-law or a stepmother, but then they had a real problem with Paul eating food sacrificed to idols. That's a classic legalist, classic. I what do you want to talk? Immaturity. So Paul said, fine. If that offends you, that I'm eating meat sacrificed to an idol offends you, I just won't do it. I won't exercise my liberty, and I won't do it. And that satisfied them. And then he goes into, I'm not going to cause anybody to stumble. That's a very grave thing. And so that's the quintessential example he uses. So now then you have to apply that in gray areas and understand where your liberties are, what your weaknesses are, and you're always cognizant of how people are perceiving you, what they're seeing, what you're doing, what you're saying. And a lot of things, this is the weird thing. People betray themselves on social media. They're really not thinking on social media. They post things, they repost things, they resend things, and the stuff is like clearly anti-Christian, clearly off the mark. Clearly, you shouldn't be posting this or reposting it or sending it to anybody. But it's almost like the person has like this dichotomy in their life. Well, I'm a Christian in my personal life, but whatever I put on Facebook or whatever I put on Instagram, it doesn't make a hill of beans. I'll put on the most vilest stuff on our social media and not think twice about it. And then people will call me or call the associates and say, hey, do you know what they're posting right now? Have you seen what they're putting on? And it's like, and the person's like, we have to call them out and say, hey, man, do you understand? What are you doing putting that? And they're like, what? What was wrong with it? I go, if I have to tell you what's wrong with it, that's even a bigger problem. And that ends up happening. And then, it's not like this is the everyday person. This is somebody that's a volunteer somewhere. And I said, hey, man, you can't be a leader in this ministry and be posting that kind of vile stuff, man. What are you thinking? And they're like totally clueless. And it's just like, wow, I can't even believe I'm having this conversation. But anyway, that's what I'm talking about. Be wary of what you're posting on your social media. Now, if you're in leadership, let me tell you how this works. When you're in leadership, you're more mature, which means you have more freedom, but you have less rights the more you go up in leadership in Christianity. Like Paul, he's not going to eat sacrifice to an idol. And that's the same thing. And you become a Sunday school teacher, you become a deacon, you start serving somewhere that's very visible. You get on this stage and you sing or whatever. Dude, if all eyes are on you, you're in the fishbowl. No doubt about it, man. And I know what it's been like to live in a fishbowl. It's very difficult because you have. One time, the guy told me, he goes, Brandon, you will have to be the pastor 24/7. You will never be able to take that hat off all of your life. And I said, that's fine, I get it. But again, going back to leadership, the higher you rise up, the less rights you have, and the more eyes are on you, watching you. And you don't realize it, but they are. And they're watching what you do, what you say, what you wear, how you think, everything, what you do for fun, all that stuff. Everything's in a fishbowl. A lot of people can't take it. They don't like being in the fishbowl because guess who gets included into the fishbowl? Your spouse and then your kids get included in the fishbowl. And so all eyes are watching not only you, but your spouse and your kids and how they behave. That's a pretty weighty thing. And a lot of people can't handle that. It's just too much. And so a lot of people don't, they buckle under that pressure. But what I'm saying is, look, you as an individual, the more you grow in maturity, the more freedoms you will have, but you will have to restrain yourself from using them in these gray areas. So, if you have the freedom to have a Christmas tree, then have a Christmas tree. But understand there's immature Christians that connect that to paganism, and it stumbles them. Now, here's the thing that you need to know. The less mature you are, the more restricted you are as far as yourself in gray areas. The more mature you are, the more freedom you have in gray areas. So when you're dealing with somebody that's immature, like they'll have a lot of rules for themselves and others that restrict them from doing hardly anything, okay? So they won't celebrate Christmas. They won't celebrate Easter. They won't, do those kinds of things. You're like, what is that? I said, that's immaturity. That's what that is. Because if you have freedom, then you would say, well, you can have a tree or not have a tree. Celebrate Christmas or not have. Well, that's not the right date. Yeah, I know. We all know that. We all know it's not December 25th. We all know that. Well, that was Saturnalia. Yeah, we know that. But you understand the intent behind it is the church was taking over these pagan holidays, and that's why they did that. I get it. I know. I know Easter is not connected to Passover like it should. I know. The church divorced itself from the Jewish roots. I know. I know the 40 days of Lent is the worship of Tammuz. I know. But if that bothers you, then just don't do it. But you can't put that on others. So what I'm trying to say is, if you notice in your life you have all these restrictions, like in the old days, the fundamentalist says you can't go to the movies, can't go to rated R movies, you can't do this, you can't dance, you can't Women have to wear they can't wear pants. They have to only wear skirts. Men can only have comb-overs if it's an inch above their ear, and they can't wear toupees. Yeah, I know. It's crazy. I know. There used to be a thing called hairology in fundamentalism. And it's just so stupid, man, and it was called hairology in fundamentalism, and they went through how a man can wear his hair with a comb over. So stupid, absolutely stupid. But that's the lengths the fundamentalists went to in creating legalism. Can't dance, can't do this, can't do that. It got really bad. And then you had prohibition in the early Americana, and that was all coming from fundamentalists and stuff like that, and got their way. But look what that led to. People still did it. It didn't stop it. So anyway, you can just go down the line on any gray area, and you have to think about it. Can I do this? Is this edifying? Paul will say things like, everything is lawful for me, and he's talking about gray areas. Everything is lawful for me, but he'll then qualify and says, but not everything is beneficial. So he's saying, look, there's some things I'm saying no to because I just don't get any spiritual edification out of that. Whatever was on his mind, I don't know. And he just said no to it. It wasn't being edified. Maybe for you, you can't. I know a lot of people that have been in the occult, and a lot of people will say they can't watch scary movies. That's fine. I get it, and they're freaked out about it because they were in the occult, in Satanism and witchcraft and stuff, and those movies really freaked them out. I get it. Okay, so that's going back on their background, and that's fine. But you can't say, and nobody should watch scary movies. Okay, you can't do that. That's something for you. If that bothers you, then okay, you refrain from doing that. And things like that nature. Food is another big issue. Food causes people to stumble big time. Okay? Now, what does the scriptures tell you to do as far as when you go out to eat with people? What are you supposed to do? It says you're supposed to put a knife to your neck, which is a Hebraism, which means you go in there and you leave some food on the plate when you're gone. Don't start scarfing down everything and going at it like a glutton. The idea of having a knife to your neck is you're restricting how much you eat, and if you're still hungry, then when you go home and go eat then. But you don't pig out at somebody's house. You don't pig out at a restaurant. You don't do that. And plus, especially like in the Jewish home, you were going to somebody's home. And so, if you say, is there more? I want more. It's like, whoa, no, we don't do that. We don't do that. And so, a thing to think about when you're out eating with other people. Now, if you're by yourself, then eat all you want. I don't care. No one cares. But with other people that might be treating you, cooking a meal for you, you're providing for you, giving you hospitality, that's when you restrain yourself. Now, some of us have dietary restrictions and stuff like that. Like I have celiac, so I can't eat gluten. But if I go back to custom and you have no dietary restrictions, you must taste everything, but you don't have to eat everything. Okay, so if you went to a Middle Eastern home and they served you, you need to taste everything. The dessert, this, that, everything, because it's rude if you don't. But it doesn't mean you eat, if they give you a slice of cake, it doesn't mean you have to eat the whole cake. You just eat a bite as a good guest would do. You try out what they all offer you. But the way you leave the table is you leave some food left on your plate. That's how you do decor. That's how you do Middle Eastern hospitality. If someone's serving you, you leave there. You don't scarf and lick the plate like that, okay? Now, you have to tell your teenagers that, but there's a whole Middle Eastern way of handling food too. I know it's a whole big thing because let's talk about food in the sense of, let's say we're in the first century with Jesus. So in the first century, you got invited to dine with somebody. You actually went into their house, okay? So you didn't have restaurants or anything like that. And they would treat you with the highest respect. They would give you the best food that they had available that they could afford. And it was really a big deal to be treated that way. They washed your feet and the whole thing. But what was the point? The point is not necessarily the food. The point of eating a meal with somebody was for the fellowship. It was for the discussion. It was for being together with somebody, not having like the best food or this and that. The food wasn't necessarily the intent. Even though it was to be the best, that necessarily wasn't the issue. It was the company that you were keeping. This is why Jesus says, "Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears me and opens a door, I will come into him and dine with him and he with me." That's not a salvation. That's a call to fellowship. I want to fellowship with you by dining with you. So this is how we would communicate and talk with one another. So that's another area that you have to be cognizant of. Again, just think about this. If someone's taking you out and you know their socioeconomic status, do not start ordering steak and lobster, right? If you know their socioeconomic status and they're treating you, you order the ham and cheese sandwich, okay? Don't go for the steak and lobster. That's not fair. So you have to be cognizant of the person because people will just, okay, steak and lobster, let's go, man. It's on you. I'm ordering everything on the menu. It's like, oh no, don't do that. You would be amazed of how crazy food makes people. It makes them crazy, especially if they get a free meal. They go nuts. It's like they've never eaten before, and it's like, are you kidding me? What is wrong with you? But anyway, the proverb is put a knife to your throat so you don't cause people to stumble. Okay, so we're talking about, gray areas. So you have holidays, you have the way you present yourself, right? The way you present yourself, you have the things you say. So one of the things that Scripture will talk about is to refrain from coarse talking, okay? Now, no one cares what you're saying to yourself in your own home or in your garage or whatever. But you get out in public and you start telling dirty jokes and you're really risque and talking like crazy. Hey man, you're going to cause people to stumble. That's immediately what they're going to pay attention to. Is how is this person talking? What do they involve themselves in? You may not be the author of what's being said, but if you're starting to hear really bad talk and language and these guys are really getting out of control, remove yourself. Remove it because people are watching how you respond to the fraternity language, okay? And they want to know, is this guy different? Now, you don't have to make a scene or anything. Just slide away and not be a part of it because everybody's watching you if you will take part in the coarse gesturing. That's what Paul is referring to. He's saying, don't get involved in things like that because it does hurt your witness. So, it's the things you say, things you do, things you wear. I think that pretty much covers everything. But, if you have any questions, we can talk later. But that's the idea. Is I'm on the lookout to not cause people to stumble because of what I'm doing, and so it's a big deal. It's a big deal. That's why public sin is treated so harshly in the church. That's why there's church discipline. I've talked to you guys about church discipline because public sin It's just it causes unbelievers to stumble, big time. Now if I want to, now I'm going to dig a little bit deeper. So those are the gray areas. But what do you think the number one reason why unbelievers stumble with Christians? What do you think the number one reason is? The number one reason that people become atheists, people become agnostics, people go crazy is because they see hypocrisy in people, in Christians. And this is true. There is hypocrisy. No doubt about that. There is hypocrisy in Christianity. Yeah, and I totally expect that, because if a good segment of Christendom is not even real, they're the tares among the wheat, of course you're going to see hypocrisy. Absolutely. So when someone tells me that, I said, you're totally right. But understand, a category of them are not even real. And then the other category are immature, so they don't know any better. Another category are worldly, so they're blinded to that. Another category are carnal, which means they're ruled by their sin nature. And then the other category are mature. I said, so yeah, I totally understand. If you get any slice out of one of those categories except for the fully mature one, yeah, you're probably going to see hypocrisy. No doubt about that. And I have no problem explaining that to people. But that's what happens, is hypocrisy, just even religious hypocrisy. So Marx, he responded with Marxism because of his dad's religious hypocrisy. He saw his dad, I think, because Marx was Jewish, he saw his dad, I can't remember what denomination, they were Jewish, and I don't know if they were going Presbyterian or Lutheran, I can't remember what denomination they were. And he was like, Dad, I thought we're Jewish, and what are we going over here to become Christians over here? And he says, it's good for business. That was it. That was it. Good for business, huh? And of course, Marx developed Marxism, but he saw the hypocrisy with his father. And look, there's a lot of that, no doubt about that. And a lot of us even have to overcome that in our own lives. And we understand when we're trying to talk to people, look, don't look at the people, look at the one we should follow, which is Christ, because he never was a hypocrite and was totally sinless. But that is what causes a lot of people to stumble in their lives. They just don't see a consistency, in their life. And again, what are people really looking for? They're not looking for perfection, if they're going to be honest. It's not perfect. It's consistency. Are we going to make mistakes? Are we going to take 2 steps backwards sometimes? Absolutely. But what is the general trail of the person? What's the trajectory? What's the projection of where this person is going? If they see this person going zigzagging all over the place and backwards and up and down and for 5 years they're non-existent in church and stuff like that, that really throws a lot of people off. But a consistent walk with the Lord, really, that's the biggest sell point, if you want to say that, to people who are unbelievers, is consistency. That's all they need to see is consistency, not perfection. So that's a big driver for that. Okay, any questions on that? And I'll move on. All right, cool. Okay, another thing I'm just going to briefly cover is, and we talked about this with Noah, is to uncover nakedness. That's a Hebrew idiom. Leviticus 18, we'll talk about it. None of you shall approach anyone who is near of kin to him to uncover his nakedness. I am the Lord. So uncover someone's nakedness means to have sex with them. And typically when you see it through Leviticus, it's unnatural sex. It's incestuous many times. But so it's a Hebraic expression for sexual relations, but typically it's incestuous. So like when we go back to Noah, we studied that before. They uncovered the nakedness of Noah, which means that the boy had sex with the mom. That's what that meant based on this idiom being found in Leviticus. It literally means to make the naked visible, is what it means literally. But again, it's to have sexual relations, and those sexual relations are typically incestuous. So here's another one, Leviticus 18, the nakedness of your father or the nakedness of your mother you shall not uncover. Again, that is incestuous. She is your mother, you shall not uncover. So basically it's saying you can't have sex with your mom. That's what God's putting down. And this is where the law is coming in for the first time in human history of forbidding incest with close family members. You shall not uncover her nakedness, the nakedness of your father's wife you shall not uncover. It is your father's nakedness. Leviticus, the man who lies with his father's wife has uncovered his father's nakedness. That's what the guy in Corinth was doing. And again, it's all prohibition against incest, adultery, and that. And so when you apply this to Noah and what happened with Ham, that's what happened. And then that's why he curses Ham's his grandson, the child, Canaan. And the Canaanites were cursed because of that, because that was an incestuous relationship. And basically what Ham was trying to do is steal the headship of the father. That's what they were doing, and that's how they thought in those times where they want federal headship, and the way they have federal headship is to be the breeder of the family, basically, and then to take over the matriarch. And that's what kings did. Kings did that. They would take over another king's harem, or and bring them in, and that's what Absalom did with David. He took David's harem and basically was exerting his authority over David's harem. So you had that going on all through the Bible times. Let's go. Did we do to bear iniquity? I think we did. No, maybe we didn't. Let's do bear iniquity. Leviticus, if a person sins in hearing the utterance of an oath and is a witness, he shall bear his guilt. Leviticus 10:17, why have you not eaten the sin offering in a holy place, since it is most holy, and God has given it to you to bear the guilt of the congregation? So the idea of bear iniquity, and you'll see this all through the Bible, and Jesus bore our iniquity, means to carry the responsibility and the consequences and the punishment for sin. That's a real easy one. But you'll see this all through the Old Testament, and obviously with Jesus, he bears our iniquity. You'll see other places of we bear each other's burdens, and that's another idea of taking on responsibility. Now, here's the question. This is, I think, an interesting thing that gets messed up a lot of times. It says you shall bear one another's burdens, and the way it's formulated is, you only bear the responsibility for someone else when their burden is extreme beyond measure, if that makes sense. If everybody, the way Galatians is saying, is everybody has their own burden to bear every day. And so you get up, you put that burden on, and that's your burden, whether it's to go to work or do whatever you need to do, take care of kids, whatever, that's your burden. You do that every day. That's your normal course. No one should do that responsibility for you. That's yours. So if you have people coming in and bearing your burden, which is normal to you, you can pretty much guess that person is a codependent. Because what we're supposed to do is allow people to carry their own burden. When their burden becomes excessive and it's beyond what they normally can carry, that's when you run in to help. This is important because on two extremes, you will see parents raising kids not allowing the kid to carry the burden that he should carry, right? They do everything for the kid. And the kid's like 18 years old. And it's like, he does nothing. He does nothing. Mom's cleaning his room. He doesn't clean his room. You know, he's like a king on a throne or something like that, you know, and everyone serves him. He doesn't do anything. And a lot of parents are doing that to their kids. And so guess what? They go to these crazy colleges, and they come out, and then as far as a work ethic, they don't have a work ethic, man. Because they have never been shown how to bear their own responsibility. We're having a lot of kids, guys, that don't have any critical thinking whatsoever or problem-solving ability. Have you noticed that? Like, they can't figure themselves out of a box. And you're like, why? Well, because here, the normal responsibility that they would have been given, you have to figure things out. You have to come up with solutions. And the problem is, if mom and dad are coming to the rescue all the time, there's no creative thinking of trying to come up with your own solutions. Look, I lived in an era, and you probably lived in an era, where we left at 8 o'clock in the morning in summertime. We didn't come back till it went dark, right? And all day long, we were just playing, riding bikes, doing this. And I know it's different now, but I couldn't go to my mom and dad to figure out, what can I do right now? Can you set up a play date? I can't do anything right now. There's no play dates. Figure it out. Go find a friend. Go ride bikes. Go do whatever. We'll see you when the lights go down, when the outside lights come on or whatever it is. And we as kids figured it out, right? We figured out games to play. We did this. We did that. We figured out. It was actually problem solving, right? Problem solving of our boredom, right? That's what we did. Well, let's go have a good time. Let's go do this. Let's go do that. We were just crazy. But here's what happens. What if you stay inside all day long in summer, because you're out as a teenager, you don't work, you don't play sports, you don't do any extracurricular activity. All you do is stay in a room and play video games. Okay? They're not problem solving. And by the way, they're not relational either. They have horrible relational skills. They can't even look you in the eye or shake your hand. They give you the limp, shake. Shake a hand, man. They don't even know how to do that because they're not out with people and they're not interacting with people. And so they're social misfits and socially awkward. And it's like, yeah, we can't keep raising this, man. And so they can't problem solve. And so they're perfect drones. So they work at places, and here's what you do. Pull the lever, okay. And do that all day, okay. They don't think past that. They're just pulling levers all day long. There's no problem. So how am I going to make this job better? How can I make this easier? How can I help the boss figure out how to do this more efficiently? How many more widgets could we make? They're not thinking like that. They just told me to pull this lever every 5 minutes, and that's what I'm doing. Dude, what's happened to people? Right? I mean, so you put them in a job, hey, figure this out. They can't figure it out. I'll ask Siri. Maybe she'll figure it out for me. So we have a problem with parents not giving the proper burden to children. They should be carrying something every day. Okay? Now let's go to senior saints. It is very important, especially with aged parents, that they stay as independent and capable as possible, okay? Because you want them to function on their own as much as possible. And this goes from every psychiatrist, every psychologist, every biblical counselor I've ever said or ever read. Do not do for them which they can do for themselves. Do not do that. People feel sorry, they run to the rescue, and the problem, every time you do that, they become more dependent and less independent on you, or on themselves, and they start shutting down. They start imploding. All of a sudden, they stop walking. Their legs go way premature than they should. Because why? Someone's catering to them. Someone's running to get their meals. Hey, if they can drive, have them drive to Taco Bell and get their own food. It's important they get out. It's important they drive. It's important they walk. But this is what happens. The senior saints get catered to, and the people start taking their responsibility away from them, and they die faster. Because someone's always doing something for them. And look, don't get me wrong. There are times when you have to step in, man. Someone's dying, someone's having they can't walk or whatever it is. But you know what I'm talking about. There were times where we did too much for them. That wasn't right. We should have let them do that and handle it. So here's what happens. The psychology of this is when the person feels they don't have to do anything, they will surrender to life. They just shut down. They just shut down. I can't do anything anymore. I can't do anything. I'm old. No. Look at Donald Trump. How old is Donald Trump, man? Late 70s? What is he? Is he 80? Is he 78? Saturday's his birthday. That's right. Look at that guy. That guy's unstoppable, man. That guy doesn't even hardly sleep. Look how much activity that guy does. How does he do it? I don't know. Maybe, it's good genetics. I'm just not that way. No. You haven't walked in 5 years. You haven't walked around the block. Don't give me this. I'm too old. It hurts. Yeah, no kidding, it hurts.
No pain, no gain.
And I've had these discussions with my own family members. Hey, get a little 5-pound dumbbell and let's start doing something. You're losing your muscle mass. Oh, it hurts. No kidding, it hurts. It's called soreness. That's how it works. Hopefully you do it enough and you don't have the soreness. But what am I saying? The problem is we make the mistakes on both aspects. We make the mistake with kids. We carry too much burden for them, and we start carrying too much burden for the elderly. And what ends up happening, it hurts them and it hurts the kids because it shuts them down quicker. So, I don't know what your plans are for your parents, but if you want to kill them fast, do everything for them. Just say, we'll spoon feed you. Just lay there. Don't ever move. And we'll stick an IV to your arm, and we'll just feed you intravenously, and you sit there and watch the Golden Girls all day long. That's what happens. I'm just telling you. Everybody's got to carry a burden every day. It's very important. Even for yourself, no matter what age, I got to get up. What do I got to do today? I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to run to the store, good, do it. Good, that's good. You're staying involved. Go out to lunch, go to church, go to Bible study, get out of the house. Otherwise, you're going to start caving in. Okay? All right. Obviously, with Messiah, talking about bearing, he shall bear their iniquities. Obviously, Messiah, did not commit sin, but he carried ours. And so what you have, the central theme of bearing iniquity is the substitutionary atonement, obviously, with the Messiah. And what is this? It shows you how God rectifies the sin problem. That he can't, because he's holy and he's just, he can't just say, well, boys will be boys and sweep it under the carpet and pretend it didn't happen, grade on a curve. There has to be a reckoning of punishment for the sin, which then brings justice to the situation. And so what God has set up is a substitutionary basis. Now, you all know that, but the reason for it is there is no other way to pay for this other than the person sitting in hell for the entire eternity. Because why? You say, I don't understand why one sin can send me to hell for all eternity. Well, it's because of who you're sinning against. You are sinning against a being who is eternal. And because he's an eternal being, it requires an eternal punishment on the individual. Hence, hell. Okay? And so, like I've told you, the necessary substitution can't just be an animal. The animals just covered it up. Yom Kippur covered the sin for 1 year. But someone had to come to where they can make the penalty payment that would pay back this eternal being with an eternal payment. And that's where you see the coalescing of the God-man, the Messiah, Jesus. And that's why, like I've always said, even on Sunday, you have to get the person of Jesus right, because if you don't, you'll mess up the work of Christ. What do you mean? Well, God is spirit, and he can't die. Okay, so how is God going to make atonement when it requires a substitutionary death? Well, he takes on an additional nature. He becomes a man. Okay, but he's not just a man. He's God in the flesh. So a man can die, but a man's death is not enough to pay an eternal debt. So Jesus can't be a man. I mean, just only a man. He has to have both natures, because as God he can't die, but as a man he can. But the death has to pay it back. Well, the only way the death can pay it back of a man is if the death is from an eternal being. And that's where his deity comes in. And so everything harmonizes with God's justice, with God's mercy, his love, but also paying himself back. And this is the uniqueness of Christianity. I want you to understand this. It's 1, 2, 3 for us. It's like the ABCs, and I know you know this. But when you go outside of Christianity, there is no ideology that accounts for this. In any false religion that's out there, they have no way of paying back their God. And if they have a way, that God is not eternal. And so they're paying their gods back by their works and stuff like that. And they don't understand the nature of sin, that it's an eternal crime. And so that's what makes Christianity unique. Pretty much when you go outside of Christianity, all the other false religions are the same. Work your way to pay back God. And they believe you really can. That's it. That's simple. That's New Age. That's Christian Science. That's Scientology. That's everything. Mormonism, Jehovah's Witnesses, Roman Catholicism. That's all it. Pay back God with your own works. That's all it is. So that's why substitutionary atonement is central. Now then the question is, if one person can do that, he only needs to do it one time. It only needs to be one time. And so that's common sense. But then tell me this, why at every Catholic Mass do they re-sacrifice Christ on their altar? Every time. When the writer of Hebrews says he was crucified once and for all, because he paid the eternal debt with an eternal life. So, you have all these things that once you get that right, then all the counterfeits don't even make sense anymore. So that's why it's really important to get that. Okay, we'll stop there. Any questions before we take a 5-minute break? Yes, go ahead. Get a mic.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing about the importance of bearing our own burden and talking about the two extremes as well. As you were speaking, I became curious your thoughts on, while it is important for us to bear our own burdens, at what point, because I do think, as you were mentioning, there is a right to take pride, dignity in our work ethic, right in our identity in Christ, that sort of thing. But I think there's also something where, as people, we can be too prideful, or I can take this all on my own, or I can cast my burdens upon the Lord. And so how do we develop the discernment and the humility to be able to reach out to share those burdens? Because I do think that is something that many of us might struggle with.
Yeah, so that's a big problem for a lot of people. And here's how it goes. People start spinning plates, man. And before you know it, they got 14 plates. Before you know it, they have 17 plates. And they are not humble enough to say to themselves, I can't do it all. And so they lack humility. It's an issue of pride. So here's the thing. In order for someone to reach out, they sometimes have to come to the end of themselves a lot of times. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way. But they have to come to the end of themselves. And what ends up happening is burnout. I start having medical problems, physical problems, or I start having psychological problems. Some people will go into depression because they start having massive anxiety. And you as a counselor would know, a lot of people have anxiety. Well, what's the basis of anxiety? The basis of anxiety is fear of the future, that I can't handle it all. So the more they put on their plate, the more anxiety feel they get, and they start having panic attacks or whatever. And so the problem they do with is, well, I got to keep functioning like this. Instead of reducing what I have to keep functioning. So you know what they do? They medicate to keep functioning at that level. And so, yeah, they'll get anti-anxiety meds, and they'll just keep rolling. And they'll keep doing the same pace, right? And so at some point, I guess how would I know I'm doing too much? You know you're doing too much when you don't have enough time in the day to do all that you're trying to do. You know you're doing too much if you probably have more than probably one job or two. If you're spread that thin and you're I don't know, you're working four different things, that's probably a good sign you're not doing it. Let me give you a stat. The average 1%er works, I think it's, I'm going to say it tomorrow night, they work 60 to 67 hours a week. That person's on the way to burnout if you're working that much. And look, a lot of people wear it as a badge of honor. Oh, I work so hard. Yeah, you're making some money, but you're going to die early because of that. We want to work hard, but, you know, your hours are a big deal. How many things you're involved in is a big deal. And so you would start having health problems. So my thing is, if you're seeing yourself and you say, I have a lot of anxiety, I have a lot of depression, I think I have too much on my plate, then that's when you need to reach out and say, I need help. Now, what's the help going to look like? If you're going to a doctor and all they're doing is putting you on anxiety meds, that's not going to solve the problem. That's temporary. That gets you through the season. You need to talk to somebody. You need to counsel with somebody. You need someone to get a third party and say, okay, let's look at what you're doing and let's reevaluate things. And that's the problem. And I've seen it too many times. People are not being honest with themselves. They're just not. And it's a principle of I can do it all. I can do it all. And unfortunately, here's another problem, and you would know this as a counselor. People's identity is wrapped up in this. Their identity is wrapped up in what they do, and they feel if they can't do it, they're a failure. They feel that they're not being able to measure up or do what other people are doing. And so the minute someone puts their identity in what they do, they're cooked because they got to keep the image up. And whether that's a doctor, lawyer, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, it's hard. So simple answer is honesty with themselves. And then I need to talk to a navigator. And a navigator is someone that knows how to guide the person through that. Because like I've said, I think I said this last week, if you go to your peers and they don't have knowledge of this, they're going to say, well, I'll just pray for you, and you'll get that support, and that's fine. And maybe they should say, yeah, you need to go talk to somebody that can help you. So that's my admonition. Don't try to handle this on your own. You've got to talk to a professional, whatever. But please, don't get me wrong. You might have to medicate, okay? You might have to medicate, especially if you're having panic attacks and anxiety disorders. You have to smooth that out. You have to get that figured out. But that's a season, okay? But long term, the way you cure anxiety is you have to think correctly. It really in cognitive research, which goes right along with the Bible, what you believe affects how you behave. What you believe affects your attitude. What you believe affects your emotions. And so long term, yeah, you can take a pill and you might need to take a pill. But long term, you have to start thinking differently. That's the long-term solution. So anyway, I hope that helps anybody. That's a long answer, sorry.
Hey everybody, I need your help. And I need your help in 3 different areas. First of all, I need your help on our channel. Our channel is working against an algorithm. And so we need you to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. And if you'll do that, that helps us get the message out to many people. It outdoes the algorithm that's working against us. So if you'll do those things, real simple, like, subscribe, hit the bell, it'll get our message out to as many people as possible. The second thing you could do to help us out is prayer. We get a lot of pushback online from not only human beings, but from the demonic realm as well. And so we need prayer. And so if you can pray for our ministry, that would greatly help us out. And third, it takes a lot of financial resources to put these programs on. And so we do a lot of filming, with a lot of editing, a lot of going on location. In fact, sometimes we film in Israel. And we film in Turkey and different places like that. And so it takes a lot of money to do these special programs that we put together. And so we need finances. And so if the Lord puts it on your heart to help us, that would be greatly appreciated by us in our ministry. So those are the 3 ways you can help us. Pray to the Lord how you could do that. Real easy. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, pray, and financially support us. God bless you. Thank you so much.